Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals tonight in New York. The Pacers lead the Knicks 1-0.
That's Fox's Jared Max. In hockey, the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers shut out Carolina 5-0 to take a 2-0 lead in the NHL Eastern Conference Final. I'm Dave Anthony. This is Fox News.
Lawrence County depends on WDXE News. On the air since 1951. This is The Legend. 105.3, 95.3, WDXE.
And it is time for Bulletproof Estate Planning with my friend Stan Pierchoski, Pierchoski Estate Law. How are you, my friend?
Good morning. I'm good. How about you?
Yeah, very good. Had a good week so far?
Yeah, I had, okay. Nothing real earth-shattering happened that I know of, but pretty straightforward. We stayed busy. We had our seminar here last week.
Yeah, tell us how that went.
Oh my gosh, we had a banner crowd.
Great.
Like 50-some people. We filled up all the tables and chairs. Had a good crowd, a lot of engagement, a lot of questions asked. A lot of people want to move forward or something. So it was very successful, very informative. They ask a lot of questions, which I always enjoy, and they were good. They were good questions too. Not that other ones aren't, but I mean they were thoughtful questions. I can tell the people had given the questions some thought beforehand. So, yeah.
That's always good. We can have some good dialogue back and forth.
And it's, when they ask certain questions, I can tell whether or not they're getting what I'm talking about, and grasping and stuff like that, and they certainly were.
Very good. I'm glad it was successful for you.
And we have another one coming up in July. I think it's July 19th. I think that's going to be back in Pulaski at the American Legion again. Not sure of that. I'll have to double check, but that's about 2 months out. So we'll talk about it many times between now and then.
Time rolls on pretty quick, though, doesn't it?
Sure does. I was just thinking that we're about June, right? June's going to be halfway of the year.
Yeah, we are fast approaching June. It doesn't seem real, but it is. It is.
It's amazing.
And you have big plans for the weekend. It is Memorial Day weekend, of course.
I don't have anything big. I mean, I have some little projects I'm working on, keep myself busy, but I don't have anything really
I don't know.
holiday oriented.
Well, this has nothing to do with what you do the show here about, but I haven't asked you. Do you have a hobby?
I've got several interests in things.
Yeah, okay. Because, when I went to see the play you guys were in, you had created that car, so you had a shop there to do that in.
Well, I do a lot of building.
Some building stuff, yeah.
And I built my own home.
Yeah.
It took me 6 years to do it myself. But stuff like that. I used to be a pretty good woodworker. Now, I think I still am, but I just don't do it hardly anymore. And I would like to get back to that sometime. But that, that makes you creative, The engineer in me, like building the car, it had to look like a car, which is difficult when you make it out of wood and other things,
Right.
And it would be even more difficult to make the car like an older car.
Right.
Too hard to modify. So, but I have, I'm kind of a homebody. I like to do things around the house.
Yeah.
Right now I'm trying to restore an old truck, which I've been doing for a little bit too long now, and I'm ready to be done with it.
What kind is it?
Okay, it's kind of a classic. It's a 1984 Chevy 6.2 liter diesel.
Oh,
truck.
wow, okay.
Yeah, real powerful. Anyway, and it was kind of beat up because the kids used to drive it when they were little before they were actually allowed to drive, but on my property.
Yeah.
And they got a few dents in the doors and hitting them trees and stuff like that. I took the engine out and just tore it all apart and rebuilt it. And put it back in, and it works great, So Then so I did that, and then I put it in there before Christmas, and I just did that finished that about 2 months ago.
Oh.
Then I thought, well, I'll tear apart the steering column. You ever tear apart a steering column?
I have never done that.
I thought, well, if I can do the engine, surely I can get the steering column right. So I took the steering column out and I put it on the bench in the garage and kind of made a little thing that holds it while I work on it. And there's officially like 1,000 pieces in a steering column.
Oh my
gosh! You don't take anything apart there. Anyway, it's amazing it works at all. Even when it's brand new to me. And so I took it all apart and I thought I'm changing every changeable switch or like the turn signal switch. I'm changing everything in here, whether it's bad or not. There was a few things in it that were broken. Yeah. And I got new ones. So I said, I'm changing everything because I don't ever want to have to get into this thing again.
Right. That's a good idea. Good idea.
Put it all together. And some place, some of them, when I took it apart, there's a couple of broken parts, and it wasn't obvious where they came from.
Oh, really?
So I get the new ones I'm putting together. I'm thinking, I sure hope I can. And I watched a couple of YouTube videos, and they just never spoke about that.
Yeah.
And so eventually it became obvious as I'm putting together. It's like this piece I couldn't figure out where it went. started looking like a place it might go, and then there was a shape where it fit through a hole, and it's like, okay, I'm starting to see where this goes. And then it made sense what it was, but you know, like, when I started taking it out, it just kind of came out in a couple broken pieces. So it wasn't where it was, and it was broken.
Yeah.
But anyway, I got it all done, got it back in, everything seems to work.
Ah.
So now I want to paint it. And although I liked working on the engine and I liked working on the mechanical part of it,
Yeah.
I am not thrilled about this business of preparing the surface to paint it.
Ah.
It's, I don't know, I've got it all taken apart, and I'm ready, all the panels taken off, and I'm at a point where I'm ready to sand them.
Yeah.
And about a week ago, I started looking and thought, you know what, I really don't, because my son has done it.
Right.
He's telling me how to do it. He said, man, you gotta sand, it's gonna take a really long time. You're gonna choke to death on the dust unless you control it or move it outside, and on and on and on. I'm thinking, I haven't got weekend after weekend to do this.
Yeah.
So I started looking in and just buying new replacement panels that come already ready to paint, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking there's a couple I'm definitely gonna do that with because they're so bent.
Yeah.
If I try to fix the dents, it may look better, but it'll never look right.
Yeah.
I'm just not. That body work is miracle work.
Yeah. You
Guys who do body work are miracle workers.
There's a pretty good skill level to that, I'm sure.
It's a learned art.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think I might just go the easy way.
That sounds like a plan.
And then I'll get I'm going to have somebody paint it. But anyway, I've been enjoying that because for one thing, I learned everything there is to know about that truck. And going into it, there were some things I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you can learn when you.
Well, that's like any endeavor, I guess. And if we could link that back to what we're doing here, it's a learning process for a lot of people.
And you just don't need to be afraid to try it. You know, it's okay to be apprehensive. It's okay to be careful. It's okay to go slow.
Yeah.
But don't be afraid to try it because I mean, think about it. There's nothing you really can't learn and understand.
Yeah.
Even if you don't know anything about it, you think, well, I don't know anything about that. I mean,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean you can't know everything about it.
That's
you
right.
just have to put in the effort. So might as well, if you're doing something you enjoy doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, I've enjoyed it, but I'm like kind of done enjoying it now. I'm ready to be done.
Yeah. Sometimes a project can take so long that you do get, kind of tired of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I do some stuff at the theater too. Like every Thursday night we do that drop-in improv.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, we did it last night as well. So
Yeah.
it was fun. We had quite a turnout yesterday. We had about 8 or 10 people.
Good deal.
And that's fun. It's different. It's different.
I think my daughter would probably enjoy that. She's just started rehearsing for a play they're going to do here.
It's kind of thinking on your feet.
Yeah.
It's a lot of thinking on your feet.
Yeah. Good deal. Good deal.
Anyway, so like I said, we had the seminar last weekend and had some good questions. And, recently I've been getting a lot of calls about what we call special needs trust.
Yeah.
And, so we do irrevocable trust, we do the irrevocable trust asset protection trust. But if you have an adult child, or a minor child for that matter, that is special needs.
Yes.
Now when I say special needs, I'm talking about has a documented disability, which
Right.
is either SSI or SSDI, okay? And if you have this disability, those special needs individuals can qualify for government benefits,
Yes.
the SSI or the SSDI.
Right.
And when you get, there's certain eligibility standards for those. Now SSI is very similar to the long-term care qualifications.
Right.
SSDI is a little different, but anyway, it's kind of a big deal to get through the system and be approved. I mean, you can have somebody that definitely has a disability, and you can just tell by when you know their medical facts, like surely they qualify.
Right.
But it takes months to do it, and they usually deny you 3 times, and then they finally say yes. That kind of thing. And I never have done that kind of work, but I know some folks that do because I refer them to them. They get them eligible, and it just is a big deal to get in there. So once you get there, you want to make sure you don't ever do anything to damage that status and lose those benefits. Because if you lose it, you kind of have to go. Maybe it's a little bit abbreviated, but you pretty much have to go through it again. And it's just like anything else. They do like a recertification every 12 months.
Right.
And every year they send you some paperwork. It's kind of a smaller version of the original paperwork to see if you're still eligible.
Right.
Your assets and your income still eligible. Do you still have the physical concerns? And so they keep up with that every year. Now, so we get a call from people, and they'll say, I have a child with special needs, and I want to do a trust plan or something where when I pass away, I leave property to my children.
Yeah.
And I'm worried about leaving property to my son because it could disqualify him for those benefits.
Ah.
Okay? And they're right to think that. That's exactly their problem.
Yes.
Because that will immediately disqualify them. Because let's just take SSI is a means-tested program. Means-tested means you can only have so much ownership of property.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have to, just like long-term care, you have to lessen $2,000 of countable assets.
Right.
Now, you hear me talk about this word countable all the time. It's a special word. It doesn't mean $2,000 to your name. It means 2,000 of countable assets.
Right.
So what we can do is we can create what's called a special needs trust. Now, there's really two types of special needs trust. There's what we call a first party and a third party. Now, the one we do most commonly are the third party trusts, because a third party trust
Right.
is when the trust gets funded by money other than the beneficiaries. So the special needs child is the beneficiary, and the money comes from mom and dad, like their will. So the way to fix that is you put in your trust, instead of I leave, as you can say, I can leave a third of my property to child A, a third to child B, and a third to child C.
Yeah.
But child C is special needs, so when he gets that check from that process, he's going to be over-resourced.
Yes.
So what you can now do is we create this third-party special needs trust, and it's now the special needs the Joe Smith Special Needs Trust.
Yeah.
And now we leave a third to child A, a third to child B, and the third to child C's special needs trust, not the individual.
Yes.
Now, when he has a special needs trust, those are non-countable assets, because for one thing, the individual is never the trustee and is never has control of the property. But
Right.
everything in the special needs trust is for that child's benefit. So you can have $1 million in the special needs trust, and when it comes time to recompute or recertify, that is not part of the equation as to what assets he has, because he really has no control over it.
Right.
It's all for his benefit. So let's say you have a special needs child, and you're only getting an SSI, you get something like $900 and some dollars, $972, I think that was last year's figure.
Right.
But anyway, and it's not enough. I mean, no, it's just not enough. If you got to pay rent and stuff like that, right?
Right.
There's no way. And so, if you have money in a special needs trust, that can pay rent. You can even buy a house if you had enough to do it for him to live in.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you buy a house for that person and he gets to live in it. It's like, well, he's way over-resourced. He has a house. No, he doesn't. The special needs trust owns the house
Yes.
for his benefit.
Right.
And if he needs clothing, you don't give him a bunch of money to go to the store and buy clothes. You buy the clothes. The trust buys the clothes for them.
Yeah.
And that's how the concept works. It's kind of like that concept where I've said a time or two, I don't need money. What I need is a house to live in, right?
Right.
I don't need money. I need food and drink.
We need the things that money buys.
That's right, and that's what you're doing. You don't. A special needs person doesn't need the money. They need the services, goods and services that we can buy with money.
Yeah.
And that's how. And these are, these special needs trusts are really creatures of statute. There's not a lot of creativity in these when we write them, because they have to comply with quite a few rules. So they're pretty boilerplate. There's a few things we put in there, like who's going to be the trustee.
Okay.
If that person passes away and there's any assets still left in the trust, where do they go? Stuff like that. But I mean, some of the logistics.
Sure.
But for the most part, they are what I call creatures of statute. I can't get very creative on what we're going to do with them. But it certainly does solve that problem.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you an example of how well it works by showing you an example where it didn't work.
Oh, okay.
Had a trust client that had I think had 6 or 7 children. One was special needs. So part of our trust plan, we made a special needs trust for that child. And we put in the trust, and all the documents, anything that was left to that person was left to that trust, not to the individual. So we're not leaving it to Susan Doe, we're leaving it to the Susan Doe Special Needs Trust.
Right.
Or the trustee of that trust, right? And that's okay. You can have, like I said, you can have $1 million in the trust, and as long as you still qualify for the benefits. Now, what had happened was, after the person had passed away, and the trustee, things were going very well, and they were distributing property, and it just so happened to be this small IRA, one of these tax-deferred accounts.
Yes.
I don't know, I had $20,000, $30,000 in it, and the beneficiary was the person.
Yes.
And when I deal with people, I talk about be sure to fund the assets properly and go around and change all the beneficiaries. And we had talked about this. It was maybe 2 years before we did the trust. 2 years before the person passed away.
Yes.
And we had talked about this, and it just never got done. Okay. Unfortunately. And now this insurance company, or the people that had the money, the IRA, the $20,000. Because of the language in the trust that said, because of the language in the beneficiary forms said Susan, the individual, they absolutely positively would not make a check out to the trust. They would only make it to the person. Now that's gonna create a problem, right?
Yeah,
It's gonna over-resource them. So, that's what we wanna avoid. Now,
yeah,
there were several other things that passed perfectly, you know.
Yeah.
That one was just floating out there. It wasn't in the trust because it's a beneficiary for it with the people who hold the instrument.
okay,
And so, you know, how it got that way, I don't know. You know, I know we talk about it, we examine that stuff, we call people and say, did you get that stuff changed and stuff, but it was several years ago, so I'm
It
not
just
sure.
didn't happen.
It just didn't happen, and that's does happen.
That's
Things like that do
unfortunate.
happen. It is, but it wasn't an insurmountable problem because the solution to that was one of the other trusts we have. The other
Yeah.
trust is called a first party. So the third party is a special needs trust, and it is funded by other people's money.
yes,
Now, you can have a first party special needs trust that's funded by that beneficiary's money.
okay,
And what you, a typical example, and what you usually see with a first party trust, let's say you have an individual that's in an accident.
right,
You go to one of these personal injury attorneys and you get, I don't know, $500,000 award, right?
yeah,
That's your money,
Okay.
but you're also the disabled person.
right,
So you can keep that from over-resourcing you
Okay.
by putting in this first-party special needs trust where you put your own money into it. But it's the same thing. You cannot be the trustee, or you can't have any control over the property.
okay,
Now, the only difference between the two is the first-party special needs trust has to have a Medicaid payback provision, which means if you have a first-party trust at your death, if there's any money in the first-party special needs trust, it has to go to the long-term care industry in that state. So in our case, if there's any money left in that, it's going to the Bureau of TennCare. But in the third-party trust, we don't have to say that. We can say where it goes. We can say, okay, if a person passes away and there's still $50,000 in that trust, it goes to his sister. You know,
Yeah.
we can designate who it goes to. So now, that being the case, what we usually do, and in the case I just explained, what we had to do is we had to open a first-party special needs trust, create one, because the people they never did deposit the check yet. So we created a first-party special needs trust. We deposited that check in that.
okay,
And now we have money in both these trusts, and now to avoid the payback provision, what we'll do is just whenever we need something to buy it, we're gonna take it from the first party trust first.
Sure.
With the thought process of exhausting that. You know, but if we don't, then whatever's in there has to be paid back, you know, and that makes sense, you know, cause
Yeah.
you know, you're on the benefits and they want some kind of payback provision, so. But, you know, but you can start that way from the beginning, if you have this, if you're disabled and your special needs is on account of this accident and you received a monetary award for that, like a lawsuit, you can still do this, but it's just that slightly different kind of trust.
kind of a remedy for that.
Yep.
Okay, all right, well, good
So,
deal.
and we do those, and they are, although, you know, it's getting to the point where there's quite a few rules to govern special needs trusts. And I'm almost less than comfortable when a family member wants to be the trustee. But there are professional special needs trustees.
Okay,
And
interesting.
it's a compensated position, but sometimes it's probably better.
It can be, yeah, I'm sure.
So when people have a special needs child, you know, one of the thoughts that could keep them up in the middle of the night is, if something happens to me or us, you know, what's going to happen to this person? Because basically,
Right.
if they're living at home, you're sort of on a day-to-day basis, you're kind of taking care of them.
Yeah,
And well, this is an answer to that. This is a
Yeah.
situation where this trust will at least stand in your shoes financially. You know, it's
Yeah.
not going to be there to be the loving person you are, but it's going to be at least stand in your shoes financially. And most of the time, these trusts are funded at death. In other words, you're leaving our inheritance to the trust
right,
at death, because during lifetime why mess with the trust when we're just doing it anyway?
Right.
We're just paying for this and housing the child, and we all live together and we buy the food collectively. We're not going to bother with the
Right.
individual, what we spend on the child and stuff like that.
Right.
But at death, our inheritance, or a portion of our inheritance goes to this trust, and now they can inherit, because, you know, if you have if you just stay with something like a will, your choices are limited. One, leave them the money and disqualify them for benefits, which is not an acceptable option, or just disinherit them so that doesn't happen. Now that's not acceptable either, because if you leave them anything, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Now,
Yeah.
the other advantage of the trust is this. you can leave somebody some money, but they have to do something with it. In other words, if you inherit $10,000,
Yeah,
if that is still in your bank account on the first day of the next calendar month, it's considered an asset.
yeah,
So you have that much time, whatever that is, to do something with it. Okay, now, when you gotta spend this stuff, it can be somewhat challenging, because there are only certain things you can spend it on.
right.
If you got $10,000 and you can spend it on clothes, I mean, you know,
That's a lot of clothes.
So, but if you have this trust, it is a direct conduit to ship something the day you get it.
Yeah,
So if the money comes in at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, at 2 o'clock, you can have it in this trust if you've already have the trust made.
yeah,
And so, the way we see this happen is somebody will have the foresight to create the special needs trust. It's ready to be funded at their death as a parent. They're going to fund it, and then somebody in the family, like Aunt Gertrude somewhere, passes away, and in her will she left $5,000 to this child. And so when the money comes, we just immediately, it comes to the person, but we need to, channel it into the trust.
yeah,
And now we've done something with it in a proper amount of time, and now it stays protected, and we've not triggered the loss of those benefits, because there's a lot of hassle to get those benefits. It's like triggering the loss of those is something we try to avoid at all costs.
yeah.
So,
Interesting stuff there. I have a question for you that came back during the week,
oh,
and it has to do with the big beautiful bill.
the one big beautiful.
Yeah, the one big beautiful bill.
Okay.
And I had no idea that this was even being addressed at all in that, and it may not be. And we were wondering if you knew. Is there anything in this new legislation, perhaps, that will affect trust law?
The one big beautiful bill is 1,116 pages long.
Yep.
I have read them. I'm just that kind of guy. But I don't know that I saw the final version because it just passed yesterday.
Right.
I knew there were some areas where
Right.
they were going to modify.
Yeah.
And because one of the things I was interested in, there is some things with Medicaid, but
Yeah.
nothing to panic about. Nothing like the people who oppose the bill are saying. I mean, it flabbergasts me how they just create these facts and say it. I mean, that's not what, they're not cutting anything. They're actually adding to it. I talked about it one time,
Yeah.
back when they were first drafting it.
Well, I thought you may be able to add some clarification to this.
Well, I saw nothing in there that affects trust law.
Okay.
And you don't see changes in trust law often.
Right.
You see,
But it's the Medicare, Medicaid.
well, you see changes in things that can kind of have an influence on trust law.
Yeah.
Remember I said, let me pick that up in a minute. Let me stay back with the bill for a second.
Okay.
But there's nothing in there I saw that's going to change what we do.
Okay.
But what I was interested in looking at mostly was the impact on Medicaid, and really the impact I think is kind of welcome because it's kind of efficiency kind of things. We have people that are receiving TennCare that really aren't eligible for it.
Yeah.
And so that's going to deal with that. So it's going to tighten up the eligibility standards, which I'm all for. I mean, the standards are the standards. If you have the standards, we need to adhere to them.
Yeah.
Because if you have people, because there's people that are not qualified for it but get it, and then there's also the other side. There's people that are qualified that don't.
Yeah.
So it needs to get cleaned up and straightened out. One of the other things it does that I've never really dealt with, but it creates these things called work requirements. Now, if you're under 65, because the Medicaid, which is TennCare here, right?
Yes.
The only TennCare I really deal with, every now and then, but rarely do I deal with the under 65 TennCare. There is an under 65 TennCare, but it's different than the 65 and older TennCare.
Okay.
So if you're younger than 65 and you need to go into a nursing home, it's a little bit different process.
Okay.
You have to have at least applied for the disability. They're going to take the position where the last payer a resort, So, and there's some certain things. Now, so that's what we're talking about. So
Right.
I rarely do this, but I thought it was interesting that under 65, if you have a disability but you are not completely disabled, they're going to require certain work requirements. You have
Right.
to be able to do some kind of work or not work, let me use some sort of gainful employment
Yes.
that is geared toward what you can and can't do. Okay, so
Okay.
if you have a disability, but you can, I don't know, sit at a computer desk and do something, then you have the ability to do some gainful employment.
Yes.
If you are disabled, but you still have some physical ability to do something, they're going to require a certain amount of stuff.
Yeah.
It's not. It's taking away what a complete free ride is because you're partially disabled.
Right.
And I'm all for that too. I mean, it's you reap what you sow. I mean,
You would-
it's scriptural. You need to
Yeah.
get out there and take care of yourself as best you can.
Yeah, you should you should do what you're capable of doing anyway.
That's right. It's not a pass to just do nothing. Anyway, and I kind of glassed over it relatively quick. I got the concept, but like I said, just never really much entered into what we do.
Okay.
But I know it's out there. Now that's all I saw, and actually there would be they're actually adding like about 140 billion to it. So
Right.
they're doing quite a bit with it. They're not cutting it. They're not. You know, somebody got on there and said, you know, millions of Americans are going to lose their Medicaid and healthcare. I mean, it's not that at all. There's nothing in there that talks about that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's they haven't.
But that's what you've heard, is
Yeah.
they're cutting this, and they're
Well,
cutting
here's the
that.
problem. They say that, and then they don't go into details.
Right.
If you're going to
exactly.
say that, then spend the next 20 minutes explaining why.
Yeah.
And somebody got up there and said, I think this is a disastrous bill, and I think the American people know why. It's like, you know, if I could say, if it was on TV, I would like to be there and say, wait a minute, what is it that I'm supposed to know?
Yeah.
What do you know that I don't know? Why is it a disaster? I mean,
Yeah.
everything I've seen is 100% positive. I can't see anything negative about it. And
Yeah.
and so explain to me what I'm missing.
Yeah.
And they don't. And that just makes it pure rhetoric on their end. It has to.
Yeah.
You know, if I say something in here, something that doesn't work or does work, I
You
spend,
mean-
I spend the hour discussing why it does or why it doesn't.
You mean to tell me there's a lot of rhetoric in politics?
You know, shockingly so. Shockingly so. A lot of hot air.
A lot of hot
I
air?
call it,
You
from
mean
all-
to tell me that? Oh my
from-
gosh.
From all of them. I
Who
swear.
knew?
But I have not seen anything.
You know, with some of the recent reporting, it's hard to believe anything they say.
I know it. Now, when you talk about the one big beautiful bill, there's a lot of things in there.
Yeah.
And that's why it's gotten its name.
Yeah.
And it has a name for a reason. I mean, that kind of bill, I mean, it deals with border funding.
Yes.
Deals with immigration stuff. It deals with
Military.
quite a few different things.
Yeah.
And this I don't quite understand, but I'd like to. Sometimes there's just not enough hours in the day. You know, but and because it's that kind of a bill with all that stuff in it, that's what allows it to pass the Senate with just a majority vote rather than the 60-40 vote. Now, I
Wow.
don't quite get that. It's got a name. It's a rule called like Jones Rule or something. I can't think of. I heard it mentioned on, but that's why they were talking about making it this one big beautiful bill, because there's a way it can pass without the supermajority.
Ah.
And
That's interesting.
But I'm not sure. I'm really not. It's anything further than that's way out of my lane. But it does have a lot of different subject matters in it.
It seems to be intentionally complicated up there.
Well, it's complicated. Well, the bill.
Well, the process.
Oh, the process. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Process. But the process tries to be fair, and
Yeah.
In other words, if the Senate decides to change some things, then it's got to go back to the House
Yeah.
for them to agree with that change. You can't. Something can only go through if both houses in agreement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it may go back and forth a few times. I
Yeah,
don't
it
know.
probably will.
And there are some folks that were talking about change, but the changes they were talking about are definitely within the foundational base. There's no real reason to think it would change anybody's mind down below.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Wow.
that's the process, and it's hopefully it will. I mean, it's the tax cuts in there are pretty incredible.
Really?
Biggest ever, not in the last 10 years, not in the last 50 years, ever. Since we've been taxed. Incredible. This no tax on Social Security,
I've
no
heard
tax
that.
on tips, and there's no tax on overtime is huge.
Yeah.
I used to work hourly
Yeah.
years ago, and when you work hourly and you do work overtime, typically most employees get it at time and a half, but I've had some contract jobs where I was only able to negotiate like a time and a quarter, but nonetheless you get
Yeah.
enhanced pay for overtime.
Right.
And if you do the math, it's taxed at, it's taxed.
Yeah.
And you do the math, it's like if you put in a little bit of overtime, it seems like it's more profitable than you put in a lot. You think, well, how can that be? Because if I'm working a lot of overtime, I'm getting a lot of pay.
Yeah.
But it's almost like there's a turn of diminishing, or a point of diminishing returns where the overtime gets taxed at such a way or a rate that even though you put in 5 more hours of overtime, the take home is not as good as
Yeah.
it would seem.
Yeah,
I mean?
right.
It's not like the two converge on each other.
So that is big.
So people are going to put in overtime. I mean, that, if you, and a lot of jobs require it, whether you want to do it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why they pay extra, to make it worth your while.
Right.
Now, first thing that dawned on me was they pay it, typically overtime is one and a half, right?
Typically, yes.
And there's some thought process in why it's 1.5, and part of that thought process is to overcome the taxation.
Yeah.
You still get extra compensation for that hour.
Yeah.
So if the tax goes away, is the 1.5 gonna change to something other?
Well, this may be.
The bill didn't change it, but I'm just saying, it's, you know, that I saw.
This may be a dumb question, but if there's no tax on overtime, do they mean on the entire overtime wage or just the increase? In other words, if you're a $10 an hour guy, just to make it simple, and your overtime is $15, is the tax gonna be off of the 5 or off of the whole 15?
It's off of the, it's off, let me think of it. My understanding of it, you know, it's still, you're still paying income tax on the wage,
Yes,
okay? But the additional that you earn because it's overtime
okay,
is not taxed.
won't be taxed,
Yeah.
so the
So
additional.
the $5 in
So
your
the
case.
$5 in the addition would not be taxed?
It's not like all the money you make on overtime doesn't get any tax.
Hmm.
It's still a wage.
Okay, I got it now.
Now, I understand it, but, you know, when I read it, like I said, I have read the thing, and I read it over a fair amount of time, you know, last month or so. But there are certain areas that when I get to them, I went through them a little scanning, you know, but I mean, some of it caught my eye, and I wanted to read it, but that's why I remember. But I'm not gonna say that's.
For those who don't know, if you want to read a bill like that that's in process, where would you go?
You can usually go to the government sites. I don't know the exact one right now, but I know to go to the site for the Tennessee. I mean, for the Supreme Court decisions.
Yeah,
That's, you know, you can get to that. You just type in Tennessee Supreme Court slip opinions or something, and they'll
Right.
give you a link to go to.
okay. You can
Same
find.
thing. Same thing with this. If you type in, you know, the text, you'll see the resolution,
Right.
the actual document that they're proposing, and it's, you know, in PDF form. There's a lot. I mean, it's pretty long, but.
Oh, yeah,
But again, if there's something in there, there's probably at least something in there that would interest you to read, because it covers a lot of different
yeah,
things.
yeah,
And all this stuff they were talking about with Doge, you know, a lot of those things you can't change unless they make it law.
yeah,
Executive orders either don't reach it or only reach it temporarily or something like that.
right,
So all these changes that they're making with funding, which is why they call it a budget bill in a way, you know, they're dealing with
Right.
a lot of this spending and stopping it, or the wasteful spending, let me put it that way.
yeah, exactly. And we evidently had a lot of
Which
it.
I'm all for. I mean, just as, I've always known, you know, they always make jokes. Ever since I was a kid, or ever since I was old enough to pay attention to jokes they make.
Yes.
I'm sure they were going on a lot longer than when I've been around, but they always had these jokes about, oh, a hammer costs $250. When the government buys a hammer, they pay $200 for a hammer.
Right.
I mean, stuff like that. You know,
Yeah.
toilet seats were $150.
And it happened.
And, I mean, so is wasteful spending.
Yeah.
And I'm all for cleaning it up, because that all falls on us.
Yeah.
Now, paying for it is one thing, but when you start paying wastefully for it, and then nothing's done about it over time, then it becomes commonplace and the norm.
Yeah,
And it's like, well, who's gonna complain about it, because nobody's complained about it since?
right,
And it just kind of starts to grow, I think. It just gets bigger and bigger. And, you know, there's some of the stuff that this thing's gonna do is actually gonna whittle away at our actual national debt,
right.
which is at 36 trillion. Now, you know, things like this bill, they cost money, and there's some argument that, well, it's just putting us further in debt. But you know, what the argument doesn't encompass is the over $10 trillion now that's been brought into this country in new investments.
Oh, yeah.
Which is going to, and the growth of the economy from all the jobs that are going to be happening. I mean, they're already happening. So, you know, in the long run, you know,
Yeah.
it's things like this, problems that have occurred over a century,
Yeah.
which is like our national debt,
Yeah.
don't change. We don't change it overnight.
No.
But which is definitely a path to get there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm not a politician. I'm really not much of an economist. I mean, I get a basic understanding of how economics work, but
Yeah.
you know, I'm not the person to really get the straight scoop from. But I'm optimistic. I'm very optimistic.
Well, I try to pay attention, but there's so much to know. You can't know it all. It seems.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can't.
Yeah.
But anyway, to answer your original question, I didn't see anything that concerned me on trust law.
Okay. Very good.
Now, and again, here's one of the reasons why. Trust law is governed by the individual states. This is a federal
True.
bill that doesn't really reach to the states. You know, the stuff we're doing in this bill is not state regulated stuff.
Yeah, and I probably misspoke on the question. I think that it had to do with whatever effect there was going to be on Medicaid.
Medicaid, yeah. Okay, and like I said, it's just gonna, make the eligibility standards stay the same, which is where we deal with it. But it's going to make adherence to them an efficiency kind of thing, adherence to them more on front and center. Going to pay more attention to it. People that aren't supposed to. I mean, the program has a purpose. It's supposed to help people that need help, and I'm all for that.
Right.
But if a person doesn't need help, then I'm not for paying them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm very scripturally oriented, and if if you're not eligible for it, you shouldn't be getting it. And there are instances of that.
Yeah.
Just like they were finding people that get Social Security when they're not supposed to get it.
Well, you hear of TennCare fraud all the time.
And I had a client come in my office yesterday. We were talking about something. I did some TennCare eligibility for them, and now the folks had passed, and we were talking about doing the final things and stuff like that. And we got off track and started talking about exactly what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And the person said, you know, when they talk about these people getting money that are already passed away or something like that inefficiency, he said that exists, and I'm going to tell you what happened. You know, Dad just passed, Mom passed away. He goes, my mom passed away a year ago or 18 months ago. He said, on such a day, 18 months. He said, just this week. He said Tuesday, because this was yesterday. He said Tuesday, she got a notice for jury duty.
Yeah.
I mean, so that exists. That stuff exists. Don't think that, no, they're not making that crap up. It really is out there. And, and now I get the fact that somebody passes away, all this stuff's not going to change the next day because they're gone.
Right.
But 18 months, really, in the town of Pulaski?
Yeah.
This is where this was?
Yeah.
I mean, we can do better than that. I mean, we can do better than that.
Yes.
You can't just say, well, don't tell me, don't tell me this isn't a government operation, Yeah. That's just being complacent, accepting it. So that kind of stuff does exist, and I'll bet it exists. And all that, when they say they find it, I don't doubt it for a minute. I just don't doubt it for a minute.
It's, there's been so much, and of course I know we're kind of off topic, I guess, a little bit, but there's been so much that's come out in the government waste thing. And I was thinking about the air traffic controller stuff. Yeah. We spend millions and billions and billions, but they got old computers.
Big time old.
They got old.
Oh my gosh, you hear
and we've thrown how much money at it, and they've got old ancient stuff. That doesn't make sense.
And they're working on floppy disks.
Working on floppy disks.
I mean, really?
That's.
I'm with you. I mean,
how does that happen?
Somebody's going to have to explain that to me.
Yeah, how does that happen?
We have to have a plane crash. Well, we just had the close calls. But we have to have a plane crash where 300 people are killed to wake up to this problem.
Yeah.
Really? I get you. But anyway, I mean, it's moving forward. And just as we're waiting to get on the air, you guys play the news.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you heard or not, but they said they're expecting more people to travel this Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Than in the last several Memorial Days. And I'm thinking, I'm not getting on a plane until they get some new stuff, man. That creeps me out.
Yeah.
No, I'm a pilot.
Of course, they've got on there and assured everybody that they're efficient. They're looking at everything. They got it under control. But when I heard the ancient computers that they're using, I'm like, really? Yeah. That doesn't make sense.
I'm a pilot. I'm a small plane pilot, and you can't see other aircraft. I mean, you can see them when they're close. Yeah. And in the environment of like coming into an airport where they're kind of all in one spot. Yeah. But when you're, you can't just. Well, if everybody adheres to the rules, you're okay. Yeah. Because you're at a certain flight level, and other planes going east and west are at a certain flight level, and flight level is like if you say flight level 25, you're talking about 25,000 feet. Yeah. Then at 26,000 feet, that's supposed to be somebody that's going west to east instead of east to west. Yeah. If you hear all that, you shouldn't run into people but things happen, and the people, especially in the environment of takeoff and landing, that's where a bunch of planes are in a small, congested area, and of course that's the most probability of having an incident. Yeah. And so you got the tower that's telling you where people are, because you can't see them. It's hard to look up and down in an airplane. You can look straight out, but it's hard. Yeah. Some of them have their own radar, but not commercial. I don't know.
You have to turn your plane.
It's mostly weather radar for stuff like that.
You have to turn your plane on its side to look up, see if anybody's above you, or whatever.
Like I said, we're getting off track.
We are.
But I remember when I used to fly out of the airport over by Decatur, Alabama. Yeah. Right behind the college. Yeah. There's the Calhoun College. Yeah. We used to call it UCLA. Yeah. The University of Calhoun, alongside the airport. Yeah. But
I know exactly where
there's an airport there. I used to fly out of that, and one of the things you used to do, because I'm in a small plane, has a window in the front. Yeah. There's no back window. There's no rear view window. Right. So when you taxi out to the end of the runway, I was taught that there's a place where you can sit where you're not on the runway, but you're at the end of the runway. You're ready to pull out and turn. Right. And while you're sitting there, you would rev up your engine, hold one rudder down with your one foot, and spin around 360 degrees. You're holding one. It's like a tank. You're holding one wheel
Right.
tight, and the other one's not. You
Right.
spin it up, and it just turns around. When you do it, you look around the sky in the environment you're about to move into the runway
Yeah.
with and take off with.
That's a
If
good
there's-
idea.
If there's anything in sight, it's not a good idea to pull out on the runway.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen. Somebody pull out the runway, somebody's coming into land, and you'll see them fly over top of them and abort and hit, keep going, and not
Yeah.
even touch down because the plane was in the way. Because the person coming into land, now they can see who, if anybody's on the runway.
Yeah.
The person on the runway can't see if anybody's coming in behind them. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of potential in that environment.
They don't put rear view mirrors on planes, do they?
I guess not. I guess not. But anyway, we dive. But when we talk about this efficiency stuff that they're
Yeah.
doing, I mean, we pay for all this. So
Yeah.
we want to tie it into estate planning. I mean, this is stuff that you're not accumulating that you really should be.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're paying so much more in taxes, and we're not going to pay as much anymore, you're going to have more wealth. And
Yeah.
so you're going to do stuff with that. You may spend it, you may save it,
Yeah.
you may do whatever, but it has going to have a direct reflect on your individual accumulated wealth. And if you spend it, you spend it on stuff that you have, and it's stuff you have is stuff you're going to be leaving to the children. Some
Right.
of it's going to be spent on consumables, of course, but
Right.
a lot of people might remodel their home with the extra money they get, and make the house more valuable. And the house is something they want to leave their kids. So it can tie it into estate planning to some extent.
Yeah.
But but yeah, we getting back to we talked about special needs trust.
Getting back to our world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have that kind of a situation with special needs trust, there is a solution to that problem, and that's exactly what I said. Now,
Yeah.
another thing, as long as we're on that topic, we'll just stay on it to the end because we're running out of time. And I said this concept: if you're special needs, you have to have, if you're in, especially in the SSI, you can't have more than $2,000 of countable assets. Now, that created a problem for years because some people, like I'm gonna use I have a relative that is autistic, but they're kind of on the high functioning end of autism. I mean, they have she's got a job,
Yeah.
part-time job.
Yeah.
I don't know that they'll ever reach the point where they completely take care of themselves.
Yeah.
100%. But I mean, she's pretty high functioning. You know what I mean? Now, if she gets a job and gets paid, that is going to over-resource her. So it kind of discourages that, right?
Yeah.
So now we had this thing. I can't think of when it came into about. I think it was in the mid 2005 to 2010 range. We came up with these things called ABLE accounts, ABLE.
Yeah.
And it stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. And what it allows people to do is to work. It's kind of a self-esteem thing. It allows them to work, get paid,
Yeah.
and fund these ABLE accounts. And the money in the ABLE account is not considered a resource that they'll calculate when they're looking to see if you're still eligible.
Right.
Now it's limited, on how much you can put in there and how much you can put in there in a year and how much can be in there in the aggregate. But it's a pretty neat thing because now these people can, a special needs person can work. But like
Right.
I said, that's a self-esteem thing for most people.
Yeah.
If I can contribute and do something, I want to do it.
Yeah.
And it's based on your ability, and you can get paid for it, and that's a self-esteem thing. Hey, I'm doing a job, and I'm getting paid for it. I'm taking care of myself, and and you can. It's geared not to disturb the this, and Tennessee adopted that,
Yeah.
and so that's an advantage.
We kind of identify ourselves by what we do sometimes.
In all my special needs trust, I put a provision in there that the trustee can open and fund ABLE accounts. Which you've got to put it in there to allow it.
Interesting.
And it's a cool thing that we did. I wish they would make the amount of money they're allowed to earn more, because it needs to keep up with the value of money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think right now it's $15,000 a year and no more than $150,000 in the aggregate, meaning what's in there accumulated at any given time.
Okay.
But $15,000 a year is a little low.
Yeah.
But at least the concept is there. Now all you got to do is change the amounts.
Yeah.
That's easier than what. But so there's a lot of options out there for folks that are special needs. They'd be helpful to them.
Well, for those that might not know, and I don't know that I do, SSI and SSDI, tell us what those are.
I'll do my best. I refer this out, but I have a general understanding.
Yes.
Now SSI is supplemental security in income or insurance. No, income.
Income insurance.
I can't remember. But
Okay.
it used to be called welfare.
Ah, okay,
And they
okay.
don't call it welfare anymore. Welfare, I don't know, maybe they didn't like.
Well,
the
it
word.
got a bad stigma.
They didn't like the word, I guess.
Didn't like the
But it used to
word.
be called, no, SSI are for people that, basically, if you have somebody that's born with a disability.
Yeah.
And cannot.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's designed to
fend
take care
for
of
them-
people who can't take care of
fend
themselves.
from themselves, I
Yeah.
mean, they can't do it.
Yeah.
So it's designed for that. SSDI is Social Security Disability Insurance or income. One of them's income, one of them's insurance.
Okay.
And that is not means tested, which means you don't have to be below a certain amount to get that. That is based on the extent of your disability. Now, that's
Okay.
the thing that typically happens to people who are working, have a back injury.
Have an injury or
And
something. Yeah.
now they're considered, and you go through this process, and I've never done this, I don't.
So you go through
barely
a
even remember-
disability.
I barely remember it from law school. But you go through this thing and they come up and say, you are 30% disabled.
Yeah.
In other words, you're 70% capacity, you can't operate at 100% because of this disability.
Right.
And the percentages are all over the place. Some people are 100%, some people are, more and less. And so, money you get is based on that.
Right.
So I've seen people with SSDI, they get, $2,800 a month for high disabilities. And
Yeah.
I've seen them get, under 1,000 for, for
Right.
lesser percentage disabilities.
Right.
But that is not, that's based on that.
Yeah.
And so that's the difference between the two. The eligibility criteria for both of those is a little different. The SSI is very, very similar to qualifying for long-term 10 care.
Okay.
Very similar. Same numbers, got to be less than $2,000 of countable assets. You have an income cap, stuff like that. The SSDI, there is no resource cap. In other words, it doesn't matter how much property you own to qualify for that. So it's different. And they both have their things we have to plan with and around depending on which one you have. So when I'm dealing
Right.
with a disability, first thing I want to know is which one is it?
Yeah.
And here's a prime example. Let's say if you're going into long-term care, okay. Now, when you go into long-term care, a lot of people say, "Man, I just want to give it away." And we talked about that's like not the best thing to do. At least not when you're ready to go in, right?
Right.
5 years ago, yeah, that would have been a good idea. And I've talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
But let's suppose you're ready to go in and you haven't done anything, and now you're going in and you have this money, and they're going to make you use it for the cost of care, and you're thinking,
Right.
I want to give it away. But if you do give it away, you got this penalty period. So it's like a catch-22. But there are two people you can give property away at any time, and there's no penalty period. So you can literally, if you have one of these two people to give it to, you could give it to them Monday, apply Tuesday, and be eligible.
Yeah.
Okay. One of them is a spouse.
Spouse.
Okay, and the other one is a disabled child.
Yeah.
Now that disabled child is what we call documented disability. So you got to be able to produce the award letter you get every December that says, hey, starting January and this year, here's how much you're going to get. Right.
Right.
And so if we can that's a direct conduit and it's unlimited. So if I got $200,000, if I want to get eligible for 10 care and I got $200,000, it's over resourcing me.
Yeah.
If I have a spouse, I can just give it to her.
Yeah.
Which you would if you had a spouse. But if you don't have a spouse and have a disabled child, you can just give it to that disabled child.
Okay.
Now, suppose you have a disabled child and you have two children, they're not disabled.
Yes.
A lot of times we'll do something like this and we'll enter into an outside agreement that, because it's helpful for the disabled child.
Right.
We're also dealing with the disabled child. If we preserve all this wealth and don't use it for the cost of care, it's going to go to these children, it's going to go to the disabled child at death. But if we give it to them now, we're going to lopside what we had in mind.
Yes.
It's going to be a little inequitable. So a lot of times we'll have other children and we'll have an outside agreement that we're going to use the disabled child to funnel everything into. And then at death, then we're going to divide that property among all the children.
Okay.
The way the person's will or trust says to do it, had the person died without having made the divestment for the purposes of care.
Okay.
So there's, we have a strategy that works very well for that.
It's excellent. You have.
And we use that a lot. We use that a lot.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I think I may have enough time. I talked once that I remember about a little thing we do when we're trying to get people eligible called the Tennessee two-step.
I think we've talked about that, but you may want to remind us.
Tennessee two-step, half of it is a disabled child thing. So here's the example we had at the time. We had mom who was getting eligible, okay?
Yes.
She has two children. One was disabled, one was not.
Right.
Now what she had done was she had given each child like $5,000 gift 6 months ago. So those gifts were causing us a penalty period, right?
Okay,
Now, we could say, wait a minute, the gift to the disabled child, no penalty period.
right,
Okay, but the gift to the other one that wasn't is. So we're stuck with this penalty period that we kind of don't want. So
Right.
what's the solution? Well, the solution, enter the Tennessee two-step. Tennessee two-step is this. The child that was given the $5,000, that's gonna cause a penalty period, right? The first step of the two-step is we cure the penalty. She comes up with $5,000 and gives it back to mom. Okay?
Uh-huh.
Now, she cured the penalty because you can cure a gift in Tennessee. If you get a gift, you can cure it if you give the gift back.
Okay.
But now mom has it. Now
Right.
mom's still over-resourced
right,
because the penalty was for giving it away because she was over-resourced. So now she has no penalty, but now she has the $5,000. So the second step of the Tennessee two-step is she's gonna give that $5,000 to the disabled son because there's no penalty for that.
yes,
Now, an outside agreement says the disabled son's gonna just give that $5,000 back to his sister. And that worked.
that's legal,
It's 100% legal.
yeah,
They don't call it the Tennessee two-step, I do.
yeah,
But it's doing exactly what the rules say we can do, and all of it made sense.
yeah, that's,
So we take a situation that's not favorable and turn it into a situation that is favorable, or at least as favorable as we can make it. In that case, we were able to handle everything.
in all the conversations we've had, just, even about the government inefficiencies and stuff, one thing that kind of stuck out to me is in planning and estate planning and things that we're responsible.
Yep.
You're responsible for your well-being, your living, and then what becomes of those things that you have accumulated. And there's ways and good ways if you understand the processes. And if you don't, then you get some good legal help, and that's what this is about.
And some of it would be confusing.
It can be.
Don't. Sometimes it's hard to try this stuff on your own. But
Yeah,
Anyway, we're winding down here. So
we are. We're getting close.
Yeah. If you need to call me, it's Pierchoski Estate Law,
Yes.
Pierchoski Elder Law. Give me a call at 931-363-7222, 363-7222.
That's
You can go to
correct.
my website, which is estateplanstand.com.
That's
and
right.
You can get the phone number there if you don't write it down, or you can send me a question by email.
Yeah.
Or you can go to my calendar and see where I'm going to be. And
Yeah.
the next place I'm going to be, I think, is, I know it's July the 19th, but I think it's going to be at Pulaski at the American Legion. That's our Wills Trust and the nursing home.
Yeah.
And I think I think that we got noticed that the place we go to Franklin, their renovations are done. So
Okay.
but I don't think we're going to go there in July.
Be back up there
I'm
soon.
going to go there in September, maybe. But, yeah. So give us a call, ask a question, feel free to do it, and you can always call in on this show.
That's right. We didn't invite the calls, but we always do.
We forgot.
And we're ready for them anytime when we got the hour. In fact, we'll do this again next Friday. Stan
Sounds like a plan.
Pierchoski is here on Friday mornings from 8 to 9 with Bulletproof Estate Planning. Stan Pierchoski, everybody, Pierchoski Estate Law on the Square in Pulaski, Tennessee.
See you next week.
See you next week.
This is WDXE.
That was good for winging it.
Yeah, good for winning, that's for sure.
Sometimes those are the best.